All right, good evening, everybody. Today we are starting on Hebrews chapter 11, one of my favorite chapters in the book of Hebrews. Actually, this next two chapters are two of my favorite chapters in the book of Hebrews. And so it's going to be exciting to discuss this. And so we're going to start with Todd and Cherry reading the first 10 verses, 5 verses each of Hebrews chapter 11.
Okay. I'll be reading from the New King James Version. And you said 5 each?
Yes, please.
All right. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. For by it the elders obtained a good testimony. By faith we understand that the worlds were framed by the word of God, so that the things which are seen were not made of things which are visible. By faith, Abel offered to God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain, through which he obtained witness that he was righteous, God testifying of his gifts, and through it, he being dead still speaks. By faith, Enoch was taken away, so that he did not see death, and was not found because God had taken him. For before he was taken, he had this testimony that he pleased God.
And I'll be reading from the New King James as well. But without faith, it is impossible to please him. For he who comes to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. By faith, Noah, being divinely warned of things not yet seen, moved with godly fear, prepared an ark for the saving of his household, by which he commended the world and became heir of the righteousness which is according to faith. By faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go to the place which he would receive as an inheritance. And he went out not knowing where he was going. By faith, he dwelt in the land of promise as a foreign country, in the land of promise as in a foreign country, dwelling in tents with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs with him of the same promise. For he waited for the city which has foundations, whose builder and maker is God.
Julie and Fred.
It was by faith that even Sarah was able to have a child, though she was barren and was too old. She believed that God would keep his promise. And so a whole nation came from this one man who was as good as dead, a nation with so many people that, like the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore, there is no way to count them. All these people died still believing what God had promised them. They did not receive what was promised, but they saw it from a distance and welcomed it. They agreed that they were foreigners and nomads here on earth. Obviously, people who say such things are looking forward to a country that they can call their own. If they had longed for the country they came from, they could have gone back.
But they were looking for a better place, a heavenly homeland. That is why God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. It was by faith that Abraham offered Isaac as a sacrifice when God was testing him. Abraham, who had received God's promises, was ready to sacrifice his only son, Isaac, even though God had told him, Isaac is the son through whom your descendants will be counted. Abraham reasoned that if Isaac died, God was able to bring him back to life again. And in a sense, Abraham did receive his son back from the dead. It was by faith that Isaac promised blessings for the future to his sons, Jacob and Esau.
Cherry.
It was by faith that Jacob, when he was old and dying, blessed each of Joseph's sons and bowed in worship as he leaned on his staff. It was by faith that Joseph, when he was about to die, said confidently that the people of Israel would leave Egypt. He even commanded them to take his bones with them when they left. It was by faith that Moses' parents hid him for 3 months when he was born. They saw that God had given him an unusual child, and they were not afraid to disobey the king's command. It was by faith that Moses, when he grew up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to share the oppression of God's people instead of enjoying the fleeting pleasures of sin.
Right. Don and Elaine.
He thought it was better to suffer for the sake of Christ than to own the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking ahead to his great reward. It was by faith that Moses left the land of Egypt, not fearing the king's anger. He kept right on going because he kept his eyes on the one who is invisible. It was by faith that Moses commanded the people of Israel to keep the Passover and sprinkle blood on the doorposts so that the angel of death would not kill their firstborn son. It was by faith that the people of Israel went right through the Red Sea as though they were on dry ground. But when the Egyptians tried to follow, they were all drowned. It was by faith that the people of Israel marched around Jericho for 7 days, and the walls came crashing down.
It was by faith that Rahab, the prostitute, was not destroyed with the people in her city who refused to obey God, for she had given a friendly welcome to the spies. How much more do I need to say? It would take too long to recount the stories of the faith of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David, Samuel, and all the prophets. By faith, these people overthrew kingdoms, ruled with justice, and received what God had promised them. They shut the mouths of lions, quenched the flames of fire, and escaped death by the edge of the sword. Their weakness was turned to strength. They became strong in battle and put whole armies to flight. Women received their loved ones back again from death, but others were tortured, refusing to turn from God in order to be set free. They placed their hope in a better life after the resurrection.
Great. Yeah, go ahead and finish it up. We are in verse 36 in chapter 11. I don't know if you were there already. Starting verse 36.
Maybe you'd like to find someone else who can find it quicker.
Sorry. Mom, do you have it?
Oh,
Hebrews 11. Oh, wait, you already have it, Pam?
Yeah.
Go ahead then. Verse 36.
36. Still others had trial of mocking and scourging, yes, of chains and imprisonment. They were stoned, they were sawn in two, were tempted, were slain with the sword. They wandered about in sheepskins and goatskins, being destitute, afflicted, and tormented, of whom the world was not worthy. They wandered in the desert and the mountains, and they in dens and caves and on the of the earth, and all these have obtained a good testimony through faith, did not receive the promise. God having proved something better for us, having proved that they should not be made perfect apart from us.
All right. So in reading these verses, what stood out to you as we read this 40 verses?
How did you get 40 verses so quick?
Yeah, we had some fast readers tonight. Anything stand out?
They all had one constant thought, and that was through faith or belief.
Right. Yeah, how would you define faith in your own words?
Um, obedience, belief,
Okay. Obedience and belief.
I have a little, hopefully, maybe a little short story that when I got out of the army, I was a mechanic, but there was a fella who said, I think you could sell some music things for me. And so in my living room, I started doing that, and pretty soon it got to be a pretty good little music business. I built a 4-car garage, and half of it was my little teeny music store. That didn't last too long before I rented a half of a store downtown in Marseilles. I grew out of that into a full store next door. That didn't last long until I went to a double store in Ottawa. All of that, I would say, was faith, because I didn't know what I was doing. I just had faith that something was really happening. That's faith for me, and it really grew. Faith.
Basically, you were acting on something that you did not see
Yes.
yet, but you had something inside of you saying, I need to expand because.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and that led to my piano tuning, which I had no idea about that. It was just the faith of something to learn, and God blessed all the way.
Okay.
And that, of course, blessed entirely giving bit. So faith is really good.
Okay. Thank you, Don. Yeah, that there are some moments where you got to take a step forward, even though, yeah, faith steps forward, I think, from what you're saying, without any evidence that it's actually going to go forward.
Sure. Yeah.
I think faith is a relationship too. I think that's the old story, where a father throws his kid up in the air. That kid's not scared. He knows his dad's going to catch him.
You betcha.
So I think it's based on a relationship that you have with somebody, that you develop that trust in them, which means if they say something, you believe them, you believe what they say. And it's only through getting to know them. And I think that's part of what many of these patriarchs were. God had proved himself to them, and they loved God, and they had that relationship with them. And some of my favorite verses are verse 13 and 16, that they haven't received the promise, but they were looking for it afar off. They knew it was coming, even though they never did get to see it, but they knew that one day they would. And I think that's pretty cool, that it even says God was not ashamed to call them, his, and that he had prepared something for them. And that's what they were looking for, because they had a relationship with him.
Right. So the foundation of faith is that God has actually come through before. And if God came through before, that relationship means that he's going to come through again. I know, with the father tossing a kid, you're right. The kid has trust because he knows his dad loves him. However, if that kid, the father drops him, or the father's mean to him, then that would be the scariest thing for the kid. So yeah, the foundation of faith is the fact that God has a relationship with his people and he has come through for them. So let's talk about some of the things that came through for Noah. What did Noah have to do where he had to step on faith? And what do you think was his foundation that God was going to come through for that?
I think maybe his foundation must have been when he was small, like the child learning from his dad or parents. His dad. The whole parent deal about learning about God and their faith trusted him right through his life until he started with the ship, building the ship.
Because the thing that Noah really had to have faith in was that there was going to be a flood. He's never seen one.
Sure.
He didn't really know what that looked like. And to build a boat, I've seen some stuff on Facebook where they build a huge ship, but they build it on a dock or a shipping dock. And then when it's time to release the ship, there's rollers that will release it to the sea. But imagine building the ship in the middle of, let's just say, a desert. And then you kind of go, everybody's like, what are you doing? And I think Noah had to say, well, there's going to be a flood. What's that? Lots of water. And I think there's so many people just did not know that. And for Noah, he didn't know what he was talking about either, because he didn't see it. He just knew that God said, build this. And I don't know how many times Noah actually said, do I really have to build something big? There's this story about this builder of houses. And there's this investor who always hired him to build a house and was hiring him for 20, 30 years. And he was always building just this incredible houses. And he always felt bad that, he always built good houses and then never lived in them, that the houses he built was always better than his own. And then one time the investor basically said, I want you to build the best house you can possibly build. And I want you to use the very best, the best things. I want you to design it in the very best way. And at this point, the guy was so discouraged with all of that he cut corners, that he basically bought cheap materials. He didn't really want to have everything, spaced out the way he used to do it. The art design wasn't as good because he's like, who's going to care? And then afterwards, the investor said, all right, this is your house. And at that point in time, he felt really bad. He just like, I wish I put my best into this. And I think for Noah, it would be very easy for him to say, I don't believe this either. And so, maybe I'll cut corners here. I won't use the best materials here. If I build this, 40 feet shorter, then it'd be okay. And if any of you went to the ark, I know that's the first thing I told myself. This took a lot of effort to try to build. And I don't know how many people helped him. And that's what faith is many times, is God saying, do this. And we don't understand that when God tells us to do something, it's really for our own good. And sometimes that's when we cut corners. We're like, yeah, it's not really for me. Maybe I should focus on the things I like to do instead of the things God likes to do. And then at the end of the day, God says, this is really for you. And that is where I think some of the disappointment comes.
Well, I think also if you look at Genesis 6:9, when it describes Noah, it said Noah walked with God, and that goes back to the relationship. He trusted God, whatever God said that he knew was going to happen.
And I think anytime Noah complained, he probably complained most to God.
Mm.
And that's where the relationship bloomed.
At 120 years, that is a long time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's for sure.
Even a week seems too long sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And ridiculed by so many people that whole time. I mean, people made
Mm.
fun of him for what he was doing. They thought it was ridiculous because they didn't know what a flood was. And
Yeah.
they thought he was crazy doing what he was doing, but he just
Yeah.
kept moving forward because he had faith.
Right.
That's
Right.
probably where that saying came from. He who laughs last laughs best.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I know Todd mentioned this about these people had a future destination and they've never been there. God promised them a future destination, verse 13 and 16. And in order to get there, there's a lot of hardships, a lot of sacrifice. What do you think Paul meant when he wrote that? What is that future destination?
Heaven, yeah.
Yeah. A city with eternal foundations, it said. Right. And this is the thing. Do you think there are times when people struggle with the concept of there is a heaven? Is it really worth sacrificing for heaven?
Yes. Yes.
But that's the thing. It's all in faith, right? Because none of us haven't been there.
Right, sure.
And I know some people have told me that. How do you really know there's a heaven? And I can't really answer that. You know, I can't show pictures. I know that the people who've been there don't have pictures or not alive.
Yeah.
But deep inside, I live my life like it's there. I live my life like that's the only thing that matters. And I do believe that there's a process to get there, but it takes faith. It takes faith to say, yeah, I'd rather obey God and die than not obey God and live. If obeying God means I'm just a little poorer, if obeying God means I have a little bit less friends, if obeying God means I'm not going to live as long, it's okay because I'm going to heaven. Those things, I think, is what Paul is saying. These guys had a lot of faith. Now, the other thing that really gets to me is this verse 20 to 22. And here he talks about Isaac having faith when he promised blessings to his future children. And then Jacob also blessing his 12 sons. And I don't know I know the Bible talks about him blessing his 12 sons. I don't know. And he also blessed 2 grandsons, which is Joseph's son. And it says that it took faith for him to do that. Why do you think it took faith for him to do that? And can we actually bless our children also with faith the way they did?
We can bless them with lots of prayers.
Okay, that's one way to bless them. What took faith for these fathers to bless their kids?
Their knowledge of Christ,
Word belief.
knowledge of God.
Their knowledge of God? Yeah, it wasn't based
as they
on.
see it anyway.
I'm sorry?
As they knew it, then the knowledge that they knew they had faith.
Right.
and son.
Because it wasn't based on how excellent their kids were, was it?
No,
And this, by the way, I think it wasn't
They
even
were-
based on the fact that they were good fathers. That's the thing. I think that deep inside they knew they screwed up quite a bit. Jacob knew he messed up a lot, and he knew all his kids messed up. For crying out loud, they faked Joseph's death. They sold him as a slave. I mean, I've done some terrible things to my brother and my sister. Nothing comes close to that. And probably for you guys, you've probably done some stuff to your brothers and sisters too. And, you know, nothing ever comes close to that. And yet Jacob was like, yeah, I know my sons, but I also know my God. And, you know, I forgot the book I read. I was in college when I read it, but it talked a lot about that, how we need to have faith as people of God to bless our children. Because many times we only bless them when they're doing good stuff, which means it's not faith because it's based on performance. You know, many times it's based on what we can see. But when we have, again, that foundation of faith with God, we can literally talk to our kids and say, this is not based on anything I did or what you did. It's based on what God can do and what God has promised. That is why a relationship with God is key in any relationship, because we can be a tremendous blessing to our own kids. I know after I read that book, as much as I could, I would affirm kids. You know, I would say, God, what do you want me to tell this kid? And sometimes on my good days, because I don't always do this, because sometimes, you know, some kids just drive me batty. I'm just like, I just need to get away from this person. But on my good days, this whole scenario comes up. And I'm like, Lord, I don't know what these kids hear when they're at home. But right now I have an opportunity. And usually, you know, when I was a youth pastor, those opportunities were a whole lot because I have time with these kids, whether we're camping or we're at social nights, you know, even during a social night where there's a whole lot of things going on. I find sometimes the kids who, you know, not having quite a good day, and you kind of know that they're the ones who aren't part of the in crowd. And I would go to them and just give them a blessing. And some of the blessings that God has given me is, I just want you to know that there will come a day when you will see how special you are. And again, it depends which kid it is. And those are some of the things that I've told the kids that I know, you know, they're just not part of the crowd. You can tell. You know, they try to blend in, and there's no blending in. I just wanted to tell them that their youth pastor has seen that they were special, not because of what's going on then, and not because all the people saw it, but because God saw it. Those are some of the things you can tell your kids as well. You know, I know, you know, we talked a little bit about how we need to affirm each other. With kids, they really need a lot of affirming. And if you can back it up with action, then that would be great. And when you read Jacob's blessings to his kids, he wasn't sugarcoating anything. He basically said, no, God understands. Man, you did some terrible stuff, but you're going to be a great nation. And I wonder how many of those kids were like, really? You know, we're in Egypt right now, Father. You know, like, what do you mean we're going to be a great nation? I don't know how this would happen, but Jacob was able to do that because God promised him that they would do it. And I think for us, it would do us some good things if we can see some things in the Bible that God has promised us. And if we believe that with all our hearts, and maybe not even with all our hearts, if we just had a mustard seed kind of faith, we will be able to share that with our kids as well. And I think we can have that confidence, because I know there are things that I told kids that I don't think they believed me when I said it. I think in their mind, they're like, yeah, you're a youth pastor. You're supposed to say stuff like that. And maybe as a parent, if you start blessing your kids, especially if you've never blessed them before, you start blessing them, they'll probably going, what are you smoking? Let me have, why don't you, why don't you smoke some more of that stuff? Because that's pretty good. There was a dad who came to me one time and he says, I know you told us that we should hug our kids a lot more. And says, I hugged my son. The son was 16 years old. And he goes, I hugged my son and he pushed me away. What do you think I should do then? I said, that means you need to do it more. That means, he's wondering whether you're going to wrestle him or something. He's just not used to it. And it's the same thing with blessing kids. I think, I know I gave some sheets out that what God is trying to tell you. And if that becomes a belief for you, then you can start sharing those same beliefs with your kids and then see what happens. Comments, questions on that? Anything else in this chapter? I know we've gone a little bit over time, but anything else in this chapter that, just kind of stands out to you?
Do you remember the name Jephthah from Appalachia? The Appalachia.
No, I didn't. I can't picture him right now, but.
Well, it was a
It
girl.
was a girl.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
It was
Minister's
the
daughter.
pastor's daughter. He called Jephthah.
Hmm. Mm-mm-mm.
What about them? What do you want to say?
Well, I just wondered if you remembered that Appalachian trip where the minister's daughter was called Jephthah.
We felt so sorry for her.
I think one of the things that has come out of this to me is that they had to have faith. That faith required a relationship of trust, but they had to act on it. Moses had to act on it. Abraham had to act on it. They all had an action they had to follow through with.
Right. I think it brings out what James said, faith without works is dead.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Faith without acting on it just becomes a theory. It is when we act in faith that we begin to see that God really is for real.
I've also heard faith is a muscle. You have to exercise it on a regular basis. Otherwise, you don't gain strength, but every time you use it, you get stronger and stronger because you're testing God in some ways and he's fulfilling that test.
Right. Right. All right. Well, thanks everybody. I'm going to stop the recording now because I know we're going in our prayer session, and at this point, don't want to stop people from praying something personal. And so let me see. Oh, there it is. Thank you for joining us at our prayer and Bible study session as we journey through the Bible one chapter at a time. We realize that you might have some questions or comments on the things that we discussed today. And if you do, please feel free to fill out the form below. Also, if you would like to have your own Bible, please fill out the form below and we will get back to you as soon as we possibly can. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope to see you next time at our prayer and Bible study session.